This week, I got back home after a long day at work and collapsed on the sofa just as the news was coming on. One of the news stories was about some of the wealthiest people in our society.
Claiming to show how little tax is paid by some of America's richest people.
Nothing new here. Shortly after getting bored of the latest news on the pandemic, I skipped over a few channels and ended up watching one of Channel 4's many poverty porn programmes. You know the ones, you generally sit there and judge people who are most likely less fortunate than yourselves. And as I sat there listening to someone plan on how they were going to buy food for a week with just a fiver, I wondered how big the wealth inequality issue is in the UK. Are we richer or poorer than we think? So instead of going to bed like I should have, I opened my laptop and started researching and kept going into the night. And this is what I found out. The first really fascinating piece of research I came across was all about our perceptions of levels of wealth inequality in the UK. From a survey of 2,000 Brits, it was found that the level of wealth inequality we have is actually wildly worse than we think it is. To demonstrate this, I'm going to break down the UK into 5 subsections based on the levels of wealth. Wealth meaning all assets, less liabilities. And for context, in the UK, we have a combined wealth of 13 trillion. Unsurprisingly, I haven't got 13 trillion lying around, but what I'm going to do to represent this is have 100 £1 coins to show you how this is distributed across the poorest to the most wealthy in our society. The only problem I have now is I need to find something I can use to represent these 5 bandings. Give me a second. I knew these bad boys would come in use one day. I swear they're not mine. If you want to get an idea where you might sit in this scale, I'll put some salary bandings below where you would sit based on the information I can find online. But do bear in mind, a higher salary doesn't mean you necessarily will have higher wealth, but there obviously is a correlation. To start with, let me show you what the average Brit says they think is the ideal distribution of wealth and what it should look like. They believe the bottom 20% should have around 14% of the wealth, the middle having 20%, and the very top 20% having 25% of the wealth. We as a country believe this is fair. So we believe generally as a country that it's fair that some people have more than others, meaning that we actually want a certain level of wealth inequality. I don't know about you, but when I hear the term inequality, I do jump to the conclusion that any level of inequality should be discouraged and if not, removed if possible. So to double check this, I thought I'd do some more research that I could find to back this up. I then came across an article titled The Inequality Delusion, Why We've Got the Wealth Gap All Wrong. It highlights that after several studies on what people think about money and wealth, it is found that people care a lot more about economical fairness than economical equality. Both of these terms might sound the same, but they're actually very different, especially when it comes to wealth. Wealth equality would be everyone having the same amount of wealth. Wealth fairness would be everyone having the amount of wealth equal to their contribution. I will circle back to this point later on. But in the same study with the 2,000 Brits, they were then asked how they believe wealth is distributed in the UK. These were the results. Unsurprisingly, each of the 5 groups, with the exception of the highest 20%, is losing out. That bottom 20% will lose a good chunk. That £14 is now just £6. The middle classes have taken a bit of a hit also, down £7 from £20 to £13. So, where has all this money gone? Well, the difference between what we believe it should be and what we think it is absolutely massive, especially for the top 20%. The wealth of the top 20% has swelled from 25% to 52%, over double. To put that in perspective, the top 20% have over double what the next 20% have. Or another way of looking at it is that the top 20% have more than the remaining 80% combined. But you know what's funny? This isn't even the messed up part. This is only what we think the wealth inequality is like in the UK. This is actually what it looks like. For the bottom 20%, they went from £19 what we think they should have, from £9 what we thought they had. But what does this actually look like in reality? Well, they don't even get half this, and actually far from it. That £9 is just 50p, a whole new coin to represent how little they have. The middle 20% haven't been half as affected as the lowest 20%. Their £13 we thought they had has been reduced slightly to £11. The top 20% are of course better off than we thought they might be, but maybe not as much you might think. They've gone from £52 to £62.50. 50% more than the remaining 80%, combined. I've got to say, I find it hilarious how we're aware of how big the gap is, but we're still quite far off. You know what's even more messed up about this than what I've already gone through? Is the fact that the way that I've laid out the information is misleading in itself, as the top 20% is far too broad a category when it comes to looking at the concentration of wealth. Let's get rid of the bottom 80% and focus on just the top 20%, of which I'll break down into 5 more subcategories. If we then redistribute this £62.50, this is how it would be between all the different 5 factions. So, out of the wealth of the top 20%, almost half of this is held within the top 20% of the top 20%. This means the top 4% have more wealth than the entire bottom 60% of the population combined. So it is completely skewed, but that's enough of the bears. After all this research and the monstrous gap between the haves and the have-nots, the real question is this a problem? We talked earlier about society favouring economical fairness over economical equality, but is this distribution really fair? Do the top 4% contribute so much that it exceeds the majority of society? And let's be honest, it's not that much of a stretch to think that it is a problem when you actually look at what we think wealth inequality is to actually what it is in reality. With the bottom 20% being 18 times better off and the middle classes being 50% better off if it was just what we thought it might be instead of what it is. And all of this is just so the richest could have 20% more wealth on top of their significantly large amount of wealth in the first place. This is where the topic gets rather grey, due to the mix of both economics and the benefits of capitalism as opposed to the perceived negatives. These topics are fiercely debated, but I wanted to highlight 3 arguments why the staggering wealth inequality we have in the UK might not be as bad as it seems, or at least it's better than the potential alternatives that we have to the status quo. The first argument is the quality of life comparisons. Capitalism has got us into this mess with wealth inequality, but let's take a moment to appreciate what it's done for us over the last 100 years in terms of what everyone's quality of life is today. Let's just think about comparing someone in the bottom 20% today to a member of royalty 100 years ago. Would they be able to stream a massive library of entertainment from a handheld device? No, they wouldn't. Would they have been able to make a phone call from somebody living in Australia? No, they wouldn't. And would they have access to antibiotics? No, they wouldn't have had that either. And to top it all off, your average lifespan would have been 58 back then, compared to 81 today. Personally, I think it's quite easy to justify that even the poorest 20% in society today, well, for the most part, have a far better quality of life as compared to somebody in royalty 100 years ago. And to a certain extent, I'm very confident that'll be the same in 100 years' time. Take the richest people today, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, or Jeff Bezos. In 100 years' time, I honestly believe that the poorest will have a better quality of life as those 3. Better medicine, robot butlers, better entertainment, overall better solutions for a better quality of life. The second argument is the consequences of redistributing wealth. Everyone wants to become a millionaire, right? Well, if everyone was a millionaire, then there actually isn't that much point, as it would drastically change the economy. Not for 1 second would everyone be driving Ferraris, as it would cause significant inflation, as companies could get away with charging a hell of a lot more. So redistributing wealth is a little bit of a red herring. Yes, the majority would have more money, but the majority wouldn't actually be better off. And if anything, they might be worse off. You might be scratching your head thinking, how is that even possible? How could the majority have more money and then be worse off for it? Well, think of how much money is tied up with the super rich. Think of Scrooge McDuck swimming in his pool of gold. Well, that money which isn't being spent in the economy is actually having a deflationary effect. It's doing this because it's sat there doing absolutely nothing, and it means the money in your pocket is more valuable for it. If all of a sudden this idle money came sloshing into the market, your £5 note is going to be worth far less. And this brings me to my final point. The rich aren't as rich as you think they are. Let's take the current richest man in the world, for example, Jeff Bezos. He's currently worth around 190 billion, but the vast majority of this is due to his 10.3% ownership of Amazon, meaning that only 17 billion of his fortune isn't Amazon stock. Can you imagine if Mr. Bezos tried to liquidate his stake in Amazon? The share price would tumble extremely far before he'd even get close to selling them all. On any given day, there's around 3.3 million shares of Amazon bought and sold in the markets. Jeff owns 51 million of them. I won't be able to hazard a guess at how much he'd be able to manage to sell them for, but it'll be a fraction of their current market value, meaning that his net worth is completely artificial. But in saying all this, you might be mistaken to think that I'm all for the wealth inequality to the levels that we have in the UK today. As much as I agree with wealth fairness over wealth equality, there is a point where this just doesn't work. Education, healthcare and support for the vulnerable comes far above any attempt at looking at the contributions these individuals might make. But it is a fiercely debated topic, so I would love to know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, then you might want to check out some of these videos that I've got on the screen right now. The first is all about my plan to be part of the 1%, and if that doesn't take your fancy, then how about my thoughts on why the market might collapse in the year 2049? So, while I wait for my robot butler to be invented, I'm going to go back to my normal life of being a butler for my dog. As always, thanks for watching.